particularly and that it's in Boston.
Yeah.
Does this in any way also convey another message? Show that extremist groups, if we want to call that free speech coalition an extremist group, if they are emboldened, if other groups like it are emboldened, if there is a sense of a greater freedom in which to exhibit this feeling.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope that the counter-protesters will demonstrate, particularly the white ones who have decided to act in solidarity with people of color who are always under the heel of white supremacy, not just from Nazis and the folks like the ones in Charlottesville, but from a systemic inequality that continues to plague the country. I hope that white folks will continue to act in that way to demonstrate that there is a different way to live in this skin that we have, that one doesn't have to throw down on the side of white supremacy. But listen, unless those white folks are also going to join the Black Lives Matter who helped to organize that demo in Boston, when folks are killed unjustly by law enforcement, unless they're going to protest inequities in healthcare, unless they're going to protest inequities in wealth and income, and all of those areas where people of color continue to suffer structural white supremacy, then I'm afraid we're not doing enough. We have to be there to fight overt white supremacy, and we have to be there to fight systemic white supremacy and demonstrate that racism is not only not going to be tolerated when it comes from Nazis, but it's not going to be tolerated when it comes from the president. It's not going to be tolerated when it comes from law enforcement. It's not going to be tolerated when it comes from landlords or teachers or anyone else in this country.
All right, we'll leave it right there as we continue to look at the live images out of Boston for these dueling demonstrations. Tim Weiss, Arno Michaelis, Alicia Brooks, and Sarah Seidner also for being with us. Thanks to all of you. We're continuing to follow the dueling rallies in Boston, where thousands have descended on the city there. Stay with us.
You know you get 3 courses, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's back at Ruby Tuesday. For just $13.99, enjoy our endless garden bar choice of 3 entree favorites and 2 new desserts.
I can't do it.
Rookie mistake. Enjoy 3 courses, just $13.99 at Ruby Tuesday Garden Bar and Grill.
I am totally blind, and Non-24 can throw my days and nights out of sync, keeping me from the things I love to do. Talk to your doctor and call 844-214-2424.
Home restoration takes time and money, so don't renovate, rejuvenate. Rejuvenate is the #1 selling floor care product at the Home Depot. Rejuvenate's super concentrated formula.
here to send a message that, we don't need Nazis, we don't need white supremacists in Boston. They're not welcome here. And we're going to stand up for the things that we believe in here and send them home. What do you think about the kind of overwhelming crowd as compared to the maybe 50 or 60 folks in the bandstand? What does that say to you? Well, it just speaks to what Boston and Massachusetts is all about. We believe in equality. We believe that there's no difference between black skin and white skin and yellow skin. We believe that everybody should have a fair and equal chance to make of themselves what they want. And that's not what these people believe in. They're here. There's maybe 20 of them out there. They're going to spew their hate and go home. And we're going to help send them there.
After what happened last weekend down in Charlottesville, Virginia, did you find it even more important after what happened there to make sure you were here today?
Oh, absolutely. And, I've been organizing nonviolent protests for many, many years, and I've never had an incident of violence at any of the protests that I've ever been to. So I think it's really important that, we do everything in our power to keep everybody safe, make sure there's no violence, but to get the message out and send them home.
Jerry Belair coming out here today. He says he's been kind of part of and organizing nonviolent protests for many, many years. Very emblematic of a lot of the people who are out here today kind of talking about how they want to get their point across. They want to do it in a peaceful, nonviolent way. As you have a variety of different people out here today filling up the Boston Common, essentially trying to drown out any kind of potential hate that could be coming from that free speech group. They came out here, they said they are not connected to in any way the folks in Virginia, but either way, the crowds have spoken. You're getting an overwhelming crowd on the outside as we take a look up the hill here, just a sea of people out here with plenty of signs, of peace signs and love, and against the KKK and against Nazis and love thy neighbor. You see the big sign there. The message is loud and clear from all the folks here on the outside, and they just want to make sure this event today with all these people, tens of thousands of them, goes off as peaceful as possible. Chris?
All right, hey, Tim, I know this rally was supposed to begin, the free speech rally was supposed to begin at 12 o'clock today, and they originally said 1,000 or so people could show up for this rally. Your numbers seem to be a lot different, not the 1,000 people that they were expecting.
Well, and it's always tough, too. I mean, you throw a party, you throw a rally, you don't necessarily know exactly everyone's going to show up that you expect to show up. This is way low compared to what they originally thought. You don't know if it's just the overwhelming opposite side may have scared some people off, or if they inflated the numbers to make it seem like it was going to be an event that it was bigger than they initially thought. Either way, the numbers are minuscule, especially when it comes to the opposite side. And we haven't even seen all the crowds that have kind of marched their way from Roxbury here, but you have already thousands upon thousands of people filling up the Boston Common. And you can see it from this direction here. Some of the folks here in the free speech rally, just beyond the trees, if we watch out for the signs here and there, but just beyond the trees there, you see maybe 20 to 40 people. I haven't got an exact head count, but needless to say, if you could count it on your fingers and toes, it is not a particularly large group. When you're talking the opposite side here, you're talking in the tens of thousands, 20,000, 30,000 plus, and the crowd is only going to get bigger here. I will say earlier, we did notice there was one gentleman that was kind of in full fatigues, military gear, wearing a vest and a helmet. Police had pretty strict rules about what you could bring into the Common today. They were able to stop that gentleman fairly quickly. They checked his entire backpack, nothing of concern there, but they did take away his military style helmet and his protective vest. He was allowed to stay here in the crowd, but they took that away. The other thing I will notice just a short time ago, I will point out rather, is that we did see a guy get sucker punched maybe 20 minutes ago. He was having, albeit a heated conversation with another person, and somebody walked up, smacked him right in the face. He was bleeding all over his mouth. He fell to the ground. People on both sides came up to him to ask him if he was okay, but the gentleman, I shouldn't call him a gentleman, the jerk who hit him, ended up walking off into the crowd. It doesn't appear that he was detained by police, but that's about the extent of the violence I was seeing. But that was certainly a violent moment, that guy getting sucker punched right in the middle of the crowd. Outside of that, the heated arguments, the aggressive discussions have been just that, some chants, some words exchanged, but relatively little more than that.
It's very similar to what Sherman Siketti was witnessing on her side of the Common that she's on as well. She said that police moved in very quickly when they saw, as she described, a dust up there where she's reporting from. one thing, Tim was talking about some of the parameters, and as we continue our coverage, what you're looking at on the right-hand side of the screen is the actual original group of protesters, the Boston Free Speech Coalition, the group that so many of these counter-protesters are so concerned about. Their concern, it's being billed as free speech, but what is this free speech? What's the content of what they're actually saying? As far as numbers, we've heard Tim Caputo reporting anywhere from 40 to 60 people gathered right directly around there. And again, police are keeping these two groups separated as well. One thing as far as the permitting and so forth is concerned, we've seen a lot of people with covered faces, which actually surprises me a little bit. That
it seems like a lot of them are the counter protesters.
Exactly, and I was curious whether police would be, telling people to remove those coverings as well. I know masks sometimes can be seen as intimidating, so I haven't heard much about that. But let's talk to Steve Cooper, because we want to talk a little bit more about the content of what these folks are saying. And Steve, what have you heard over there?
Well, we're sort of on the backside of the bandstand from where Tim is, and if I step out of the way and you look behind us here, a lot of people that we're standing with are saying, is this it? Looking at the bandstand here on the Boston Common right now, and you can see the people up on the bandstand right now, the free speech rally that's now underway. It started at 12 o'clock, and of course, between those people attending that rally, it's a sealed off area. What you see is a lot of Boston police officers at this point. You see a lot of metal barriers that are clasped together, so no one is going to break through those barriers. And then there's a second round of metal barriers here as well, and that's where you see the counter protesters have gathered here. But also a lot of people have gathered here on the Common that are just sort of bystanders and want to take a look at what's going on and sort of sort everything out right here. They're well aware of what they've heard over the past several days. But again, Boston police are working with state police and transit police and the FBI and multiple agencies from Homeland Security, just making sure that this free speech rally that is underway right now, and we've actually been kept back from the bandstand itself by Boston police, and they've sort of asked us to, stand back and watch it with everybody else. But we can't hear what they're saying up there at this point. We only know that they're surrounded by dozens and dozens of Boston police officers. We should also mention, as you probably heard at this point, there are a lot of police officers that are in uniform, but there are a lot of officers that are not in uniform at this point in time. In fact, they're standing amongst us right now. I've talked to a number of police officers that are just like the way I am right now, and they're sort of standing by and just sort of keeping an eye on things. Sources are telling us one of their big concerns right now isn't so much the rallies that are underway right now, but what could happen after the rally. Made a great effort to keep sort of the two sides apart at this point, but they want to make sure that when everything breaks up later on today, that they don't have any trouble then, and that is one of their big concerns right now. But at this point, so far so good. A lot of people we're standing on this side, again, keeping an eye, watching the free speech rally that is underway right now. We've seen a number of people that arrived here a little bit late, and as we heard earlier, those people actually couldn't get onto the bandstand at this point. It's sort of a closed rally, if you will, at this point. But again, if a lot of people expected to see thousands and thousands of people here for that free speech rally, clearly that's not the case right now, because what we can see is a lot of Boston police officers. We see the bike unit now moving into position, getting a little bit closer to the bandstand, where you see a number of flags, American flags, sort of draped over the railings there. And above the bandstand, by the way, it's probably worth mentioning one more time that there are cameras that have been installed by Boston police. Those were put in place yesterday. And again, Boston police said they want to make sure that everybody has their chance, has their say. They want to recognize free speech, but at the same time, they want to make sure that what happens here happens peacefully. And so far, so good, at least from this side of things. But it's sort of a wait and see here. Boston police say they want to get everybody in here, out of here, without any problems today. Live on the Common, Steve Cooper, 7 News.
Steve, before we let you go, I'm curious. I see you're being kept pretty far back from this rally here, from the free speech rally. Is that because the Boston Free Speech Coalition doesn't want the media to be a part of it, or is this a Boston police decision to keep media far back as well?
Right now, it appears to be a Boston police decision. At this point, they set up a number of restrictions for the media. In fact, where we're standing here right now, if we square the camera around and you take a look at the people in the crowds here, I mean, a lot of people have come in there from both sides. We know some of the people who were trying to get into the free speech rally have actually been told that they are not welcome inside the rally itself. And that's why one of the things that police are concerned about is everything that's going on out here around the perimeter as well. But at this point, I think, a lot of people from both sides, when they see the cameras, as you've seen a little bit earlier with some of our coverage, people are getting a little close to the cameras. We're well aware that all this live television, a lot of people are on social media, and so too are police. Boston police telling me earlier today that they have officers assigned to monitor social media, Facebook and Twitter, and sort of see what's trending, what's happening, and what people are saying. And that's also being monitored at the Fusion Center as well. But again, something that perhaps we haven't seen before, but Boston police well versed in this. You heard Commissioner Evans talking earlier in the week how these Boston police officers have dealt with crowds like this when they had the Black Lives Matters rallies and walks that were going on through the city. They've dealt with this with a lot of the sporting events as well. So they're well trained in this. And we might also add that earlier today we saw a number of tactical teams set up in different locations, not right here, sort of out of sight, out of the public sight. And earlier you heard the commissioner this week talking about sort of a soft effort of how the officers that are here, if you look behind us here, the police officers, they don't have gear on to deal with any sort of uprising at this point, but they certainly have that equipment available, shields and batons and helmets and gas masks. That is all available. It's sort of a secondary perimeter that they have set up and ready to go if they need it. But at this point, they don't, and they hope it stays that way.
Steve, you were mentioning some of the other events that police here in Boston are so well trained for. I was also thinking about Occupy Boston as well years ago. You were here for that. And I'm trying to think about, just recollect, we didn't see the types of skirmishes, violence that other cities saw. And I'm wondering if that's part of the training and so forth as well.
Actually, it is. We were talking about that a little bit earlier, Krista. We were saying how, and I was on down in Dewey Square when the police moved in the middle of the night. And really, the way that Commissioner Evans is making sure that this happens under direction from certainly the mayor of Boston is they're trying to work with everybody. They're asking people to be peaceful. But at the same time, they ask people not to have signs with sticks on them and anything that could be misconstrued as any sort of a weapon. So they're making sure that that doesn't happen. But as you mentioned, with Occupy Boston, those people had been there for weeks and weeks and weeks. And the night that Boston police eventually moved in, and again, as you look at the scene here, they moved in and they moved in swiftly. And Occupy Boston was said and done in a matter of minutes that night when Boston police actually moved in. So again, as you look at the police here and you see the bicycle units, you see the police officers sort of milling about, this is sort of the front wave of the Boston police presence and the state police presence and the transit police as well. But what you're not seeing, and we saw it a little bit earlier, we're actually not showing it at this point, standing by tactical teams, if you will, SWAT teams, ready to move into position and converge onto the common if there's any trouble. And most notably, I talked to some undercover officers a short time ago, and they are literally dressed like everyone else here in the crowd. In fact, if anything, you would think that they were protesters as well, but they're not. They blend into the crowd. They practice this, and they're ready to go, and they're all in communications with each other. So far, so good here. We have not seen the police commissioner down here. I saw the fire commissioner, Joe Finn, here a little bit earlier, and we know that, again, they're all talking. They're all on the same radio channels, sort of making sure that everything's going safely. They also have a command post set up at another location that they're able to use these cameras that are now set up here to keep an eye on everybody and keep on the crowd. And at this point, it's really all about crowd control. So far, so good.
Going to echo those words, Steve. So far, so good. We're going to keep our fingers crossed that that remains the same. Thanks for your report there. And now we want to go back out live to Sky 7 HD, where you see the sea of people making their way down Tremont Street from Roxbury at the Reggie Lewis Center. That walk continues all the way down to Boston Common, where tens of thousands of people, as you can see, flooding down that street, making their way. The counter protesters for today's Boston Free Speech Coalition rally there in Boston Common, and they have been walking now for well over an hour. And 7's Justin Bork was there. He was waiting for the crowds on Tremont Street. You've been a part of the crowd for quite some time. What are some of the sights and sounds that you're seeing?
Well, guys, it's oftentimes so loud that the sights or the sounds, all just blend together. Right now, we're in the middle of this rally, at least as far as I can tell. You can see neither the beginning of it nor the end of it. I assume Sky 7 HD can give you a much better sense of the sheer size of this crowd, but there is a lot of people slowly and energetically making their way over to the Common. Now, one of the interesting things we've noticed here is that there does appear to be a lot of families, not just families on the sides of the sidewalks here, families on their stoops, business owners coming out to greet people, but even in the crowd, we've seen strollers, we've seen people carrying babies, and of course, just a ton of signs here denouncing Trump, denouncing racism, denouncing white supremacy. Some have been a little bit inappropriate, but for the most part, they seem to be fairly tasteful signs. Now, we talked a little bit about the fact that things on the Common seem to be remaining peaceful for now. Of course, there is a very large and energetic group that is going to be meeting the rest of the protesters and counter-protesters in the Common. But from what we've seen over here, things have been completely peaceful. Things have been laughing, smiling. There's been a lot of cheering, a lot of organized chants. Right now, things are actually a little bit quieter. And you can't really go that far before seeing a Boston police officer. There are very frequent checkpoints, and we've even seen, on occasion, some of the Boston police officers smiling and greeting the protesters. So, counter-protesters. So things seem to be pretty lighthearted here for now. Again, we're looking at, I'm going to step aside so you can just see the group. A lot of families, a lot of diverse crowds over here, a lot of kids. So we're going to keep following this group as they make their way to the Common. Be sure to check in a bit. For now, this is Justin Bork, live on Tremont Street, 7 News.
Okay, Justin, thank you. And right now we want to head out to Roxbury, where this whole rolling rally of counter-protesters started. And there you see from Sky 7 HD a look at this huge crowd that's made its way since earlier this morning. This has been well underway for more than an hour now, and all signs pointing at this point to a peaceful event. There have been some small-scale skirmishes, but for the most part, it looks like things are going pretty smoothly. Definitely some heated exchanges, though, between both sides here. Let's go to Carrie Corrado, and Carrie has the latest for us from Roxbury right now.
Well, we're at the end of this march. Counter-protesters are inching closer to the Boston Common, and they're holding signs. They are chanting. I've seen flags, music, musical instruments, you name it, it's here. Now, these are people from many different religions, races, ages. They're the counter-protesters, and they started in Roxbury, and they're marching towards the Boston Common. Now, this is about 2 miles, and I have to say some of them may make it there before others even started. That's how many people are here. Many of them actually stopped for pizza and food. One man bought ice cream sandwiches for everyone because it's hot out here. So it's really hard to get an exact number of people who showed up here because they're filling the streets for blocks and the sidewalks. Now, counter-protester organizers say they confirmed about 10,000 people were coming, but they're expecting double, even triple that, and they're really showing their support in numbers here. Again, these are the people who are against the planned free speech rally at the Common because they said that rally is about hate speech. We're also seeing people hang out their windows in a lot of these apartment buildings as we really inch closer to the Common. Now, I also want to mention the police presence. When we started, police officers were on bicycles and they were lining the sidewalks while everyone really marched in the street. So they were trying to keep people contained into the streets so no problems started. And really, it's been mostly calm here throughout my march and throughout everything I'm seeing. But again, everyone says that they're preaching love, not hate. Back to you.
All right, Carrie Corrado reporting live for us there. Of course, it's pretty difficult to hear at times, given the fact that there are just huge numbers. I mean, they were expecting 20, maybe even 30,000. And contrast that with the original group of protesters from the Boston Free Speech Coalition, as they have called themselves. From what we're hearing from our reporters, about 40, 50, 60 most from that group there. And it's been interesting.
We heard Steve saying that they're also returning a lot of them away.
Exactly.
It appeared that maybe there's confusion on who should be in there, who shouldn't be in there.
Right, and different stories too, because Steve was saying that it sounded like police were keeping a perimeter around there closed and weren't letting too many people in. Tim Caputo was saying that, if I heard him correctly, that they're trying to talk to these folks and find out what exactly the content of their message is, and they're unwilling to talk to the media. They feel like their message may somehow be misconstrued, was the reasoning it sounded like there. We do know that Brandon Gano is out and about as well. And Brandon, we saw you talking with some of the protesters where you are. What were they saying? What did they have to say?
Yeah, that's right. You know, a lot of them were saying that they found out about this other counter protest on Facebook and other social media. So they decided to come here as opposed to taking the trip to Roxbury. But thousands of people here, much different than what we're seeing on the other section of the Boston Common. Staying with us now is Lori from Boston. And Lori, I know you've been here for a little while.
Yes.
Tell us what made you decide to come out today.
Well, I'm here for my 93-year-old mother and my 24-year-old daughter. And I'm here for all the people who died for justice. Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe is very long, but it always bends towards justice. So we're defining what moral is, and we want to bend that arc sooner.
How do you feel when you see this many thousands of people, and this isn't even the main group of counter-protesters, to see this many people come out here? What do you think?
It's a wonderful bonding feeling. You don't want to be alone. You want to know other people feel the same way about justice.
Did you see, I'm sure obviously you did you see what happened last weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia? How did you feel about that? And did that play a part in making you want to come out here today?
I felt physically sick, and so did a lot of my friends. My friends couldn't even watch the news. So it feels good to be here on a sunny day with other people who stand for the right way to talk to people, for justice, and for equal rights for everybody.
Lori, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And again, we are across from the State House, kind of at the corner of Main Street and Park Street. If you can see, though, I know it's difficult because there's so many people. Just thousands of people have showed up. And again, this isn't even the main group of counter-protesters. Many of them saying they're probably going to stay here. Some saying they're going to join the other counter-protesters, by the time they finally make it to the Boston Common. But just a lot of people holding up signs, singing, and very peaceful, but a lot of energy as well, that's for sure. Kristen, Chris, back to you.
Yeah, and clearly the point is to drown out the original protesters. And clearly it sounds like people want to send a message, not just here in Boston, but with the sheer volume of people who are showing up. This is something where they're trying to send a message nationwide.
We're hearing now from Commissioner Bill Evans. He's with Charmin Sacchetti, and we want to get out to her live now with more on. Well, actually, we don't have that right now. So there's Commissioner Evans. There's a live look at him. He is out and about with people. Marty Walsh, the mayor, said that he would be there as well, wanted to be a part of this. And we'll try and talk with Commissioner Evans in just a moment. But back to the big picture here, and that is the protest. We saw Brandon Gano, where he is with those counter-protesters out over the State House. And the center of it all is over in Boston Common, where the Boston Free Speech Coalition is holding its rally there. And it apparently hasn't developed the way they thought it would be. Tim Caputo and Steve Cooper, some of the images we saw from him, showing a far smaller amount of people than the 1,000 that they were expecting to show up today.
Right, and keep in mind, Tim was reporting there was a small hiccup even at the beginning as they were waiting for their organizer to get there. It would seem that maybe part of their permit being issued was to have their organizer there. We're not sure exactly, but yeah, it was slow getting started as well. It's a little bit behind schedule as well. So let's check in with Tim and what's the latest on what you're seeing now, Tim?
Yeah, if their goal was to get people together, they did it, but maybe not in the way they intended. Thousands of people on the outside, counter-protesters, including Karen Bates here. Karen, you told me a second ago you saw what happened in Virginia over the last weekend.
Yes.
You knew what was going to happen here in the Common. Why was it so important for you to
Boston does not welcome you here. Boston does not want you here. Boston rejects your message.
Boston city leaders were quick to condemn the violence in Charlottesville this past weekend. And justice.
And I have faith in humanity, and I'm here.
As governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts,
wants to stand up to this hateful rhetoric, and it's just an important thing to do.
When you see the number disparity, the couple dozen inside there and the several thousand outside here, how does that make you feel inside?
It makes me feel wonderful. I mean, this is what democracy is all about. I mean, this is America right here. Look around. I mean, you have every race, every religion, every ethnic background, cultures. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, if anybody wants to join us, because this is America right here. You're looking at America. You know, they can, say whatever they want. They can have their hate speeches. They can think that, their race is superior to everybody else's, but that's not the truth. The truth is, this is America, and if nobody can face that, then I don't know what to say. I mean, it's just.
We've seen a couple spats here and there, a couple arguments. Have you also had the opportunity out here to talk to other people about how you feel, like-minded people? Maybe people you maybe wouldn't have a conversation with on a normal Tuesday afternoon, but you guys, by fate or otherwise, are joined today, and you could have a discussion today.
Yes.
Are you feeling that as well?
Yes. I in fact, on our way here in the train station, we had multiple conversations with people who were actually either coming here or were curious about it. So I think we have to have a voice. I mean, I know they have to have their voice, but our voice is stronger, and it's not going away. I mean, we're going to stand for what is right, and this is what's right. I mean, just look around. This is what's right. I mean, you have everybody here, and this is America, plain and simple.
Karen, thank you so much. Karen Bates came here with some family members and friends, and I think she summed it up perfectly. They have a voice, and it's not going away. And you see the crowds here right now. There are thousands already here of counter-protesters standing all around me in the area, kind of around the free speech rally area, and there are tens of thousands, potentially more, coming to the Boston Common over the course of the next couple hours this afternoon. It has been, for the most part, peaceful. One or two spats here or there. It's going to happen when you have 10, 20, 30,000 people. But like Karen said, a lot of discussion. And we've even seen discussion and maybe some heated arguments on other sides. But they're able to have that discussion. We saw a second ago an older white gentleman, a younger black gentleman, having a conversation. Boston police with their bikes were kind of in between. They were able to have a discussion, maybe not come to an agreement between the two of them, but have a discussion in kind of a safe space with police there where they know it wasn't going to get violent. They could talk about things. And I think that's the purpose of this counter protest out here right now, is you have all these people with their signs, with their t-shirts, and with their chants trying to have a conversation, while the free speech folks, ironically enough, for free speech, haven't really been able to talk to anyone because they've been corralled in this secure area just behind me on the other end at the bandstand. But this conversation will obviously be going on more than just today in the weeks and months to come. But for a lot of folks here, this is a good place to start.
And Tim, I just wanted to clarify as well. Earlier, it sounded like you were really trying to get to the bottom of what that message is among these small group of original protesters gathered there at the bandstand. What did they say when you tried to find out?
They almost deferred back to for free speech, which is a vague and all-encompassing phrase, but without any specifics to it. They weren't necessarily the ones I saw, and the ones I tried to speak to walking in didn't have any clear hats or t-shirts or sign that said one message or another. The ones I spoke with said we're for free speech. We'd like to have the ability to have free speech, which is certainly a right everyone has in this country, but they didn't really give specific as to what they wanted to talk about or what they were trying to talk about. We have seen a bit of confrontation or arguments between just generic Trump supporters and people yelling at them or talking to them or having arguments with them for just the idea of supporting Trump. Those have been some of the conversations and arguments we've seen on the outside. As for the couple dozen folks that got to go through those gates, were part of the official rally, the free speech rally that was organized. They got the permit to go in there. They haven't really said, the ones I spoke with at least, were just saying we're here for free speech. I know the undertone there, a lot of people were concerned because there was a similar vibe, maybe similar speakers down in Charlottesville, Virginia over the last weekend. Some of those speakers that were initially supposed to come here today backed out, the one that was back here in May as well. But the ones who remain, which is obviously a much smaller crowd than they initially anticipated, maybe a quarter or a tenth of what they initially anticipated, those folks that remain have kind of kept quiet. A lot of them, to be honest with you, are fairly young. I mean, late teens, early 20s, and didn't want to talk, didn't really have a message they wanted to get across. They just said, we're here for the free speech rally. We want to have free speech. So they have that opportunity, but unfortunately for them, they're only speaking to each other because the rest of the crowd out here is kept at such a distance away. They haven't been able to interact. What we have seen, though, is those who weren't able to get here early enough to get to the bandstand. I don't know if they were necessarily directly connected to that free speech rally group, or just people who wanted to come out here to be able to have a discussion or potentially an argument. Or, you know, some people just want to come out here and scream at somebody else. That's the truth of it as well. But those people have, a handful of them have been on the outside, and we've seen some constructive conversations, some talk just about racial inequality, and then people kind of expressing their feelings and having those conversations. But as for the initial group, from what I've heard, they're just talking about free speech.
Thank you so much for answering that question, because I feel like when you're dealing with something as inflammatory as this, a subject matter as inflammatory as we have seen, you have to get to the bottom. What are the actual facts? There is so much discussion going on in this country, and even on one's own Twitter feed, about what is the original intention, and is this a case of guilt by association, or are these folks really truly standing for a person's constitutional right to free speech? So
why are people here?
Right, and so it's really good to get that clarification, so thank you very much.
Now the rally, the march from Roxbury to Boston Common continues. It is a long stretch. It is a 2-mile stretch, and as Carrie Corrado was mentioning, some people are finishing this march even before it begins. She's among the crowd. So is 7's Justin Bork. He is making the march as well, and he has had a chance to talk to a lot of the individuals who are making their way to Boston Common. And are you hearing a similar message to what Tim has been talking about as to why people are here today, Justin?
Well, guys, you'll have to forgive me. I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you because of all the chants going on over here. If you were to ask me to try to estimate the size of this crowd, I couldn't even begin to guess. I'm sure Sky 7 HD has a better idea than I do. We cannot see the beginning nor the end of this rally. In fact, we came to kind of an empty space in the middle here, thinking we had come to the end of the rally, and sure enough, another vanguard right there. There seems to be multiple of these rallies, just one right after the other. And we're actually getting very close right now to the Common. We just got over the Mass Pike. And as we get closer, we're hearing this crowd get a lot more boisterous. The cheering is a lot louder and a lot more frequent. Now, there's been a lot of talk from the Common on how things so far have remained relatively stable. The same goes for here in this rally. Right now, I'm seeing a lot of hugging, a lot of people shaking hands and just cheering loudly. Of course, there are a lot of signs, denouncing Trump, denouncing fascism and racism. There have been some inappropriate signs here and there, but so far, and I mentioned earlier, we've seen a lot of families here, a lot of parents bringing kids. So far, a very boisterous, cheerful rally right now. Of course, this is a big, energetic group that is making their way to the Common, that's going to join all the other counter-protesters as well as the free speech rally. So we're going to see exactly how that goes. We're going to be following it one step at a time. I'll also mention real quick, we've seen a lot of Boston police officers along this route, a lot of them smiling and greeting these protesters. So no serious confrontations here, of course. The opposing rally is going to be waiting at the Common. We're going to be following this all the way, so be sure to tune in periodically. For now, we're along Tremont Street. Justin Bork, 7 News.
All right, Justin, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And as we continue to get a live look at the counter-protesters who have streamed into this area where the rally
and we keep saying
is taking place right now and was set to start around noontime. It sounded like it was pushed back a little bit. We want to bring in our security expert who's been watching these scenes with us the whole time. And Todd, we've heard about a couple of small skirmishes that have broken out. I don't even know if you would call them skirmishes. We're talking about fights individually with folks potentially being injured as well. Based on what you're seeing, how are police doing here?
But we really need to commend the Boston Police and their efforts here this morning as the rally is really underway. We've got tens of thousands, if not 20,000 counter-protesters here, really here to denounce hate and bigotry. And again, an emotional morning and leading into the afternoon here. The Boston Police are doing great, and also the crowd. It appears that there's some self-policing as well. So we have to really applaud the crowd and how they're responding to this type of an event. And so we've got a nice peaceful event, and fortunately, things appear to be uneventful as the time rolls on.
Todd, we see the crowd, and we see a lot of people with the bandanas covering their faces. A lot of the counter-protesters, it seems, covering their faces. As a law enforcement official for so many years, what are your thoughts on that? There's a gentleman right here carrying a water bottle with his face covered. What are your thoughts on people who go out to on either side of these protests and cover up their faces?
You know, Chris, when we take a look at these individuals, I think it distracts from the message. If you're there to support your position, why not just be a part of the crowd? Everyone there is appearing to enjoy this opportunity to come out and express their concerns, express their sentiment about this type of an event. And I think something like that really brings unnecessary attention to yourself for an event it's really not about politics. It's really about tolerance and being able to express the diversity of our country and diversity of our community here within Massachusetts, Boston in particular.
And Todd, what do you make of what we were hearing from our reporters? I mean, Steve Cooper, if I heard him correctly, was saying that the police were seeming to keep everybody away from that bandstand, including, it sounded like, the media as well. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's pretty clear that in the best interest of everyone's safety, you would keep the two groups away from each other.
Exactly. You can see that very large neutral zone that's been indicated. Again, this specific setup is by design, and it's in order to really try to control the massive turnout for this particular event. So again, hats off to Boston Police and the other law enforcement agencies that are involved in this event and really doing a great job of keeping things in an orderly fashion.
When you're looking at the video that you see here, when you're looking at the police strategies and how they have it set up, what are your thoughts? Do you see anything that you would have done differently, or does Boston seem to be doing it according to the playbook and handling this situation correctly?
Absolutely. This is a well thought out operation. You can see where the distancing and the setbacks are in place. Now, again, the fencing is not a robust fencing, so you're really just talking about barriers, but you can see there that the protest area, based on what has been outlined in the permit, has been completely cordoned off. So Boston Police are doing really good with all of the resources that have been the Parks Department as well, providing their resources to really set up a successful event thus far.
Okay, Todd, thank you. We want to get right out to Sharman Sacchetti. Sharman, what are you seeing out there?
Clear wire. On the ground, she's.
Okay. All right. So we want to get to Sharman Sacchetti because we're hearing that there's some activity where you are, Sharman.
There's just a large crowd that pushed its way toward Charles Street here, emptied out from the area where the Parkman Bandstand is. And I think you're looking at some of these live pictures. There's a lot of people chanting at those folks. It's unclear what just happened. You can see people it appears as though counter-protesters are chasing people out of the park. That's exactly what it sounds like to me. Moments ago, I spoke with the police commissioner who said things have been going very peacefully. And in fact, he just walked right up this entrance that you are looking at right now. He said there had only been one arrest so far and that there were about 15,000 marchers headed this way. That's what the commissioner told me. But I'm not clear what prompted that, but it looked as though a number of people were just pushed out of the common, and you could hear them yelling sort of expletives at a particular person or a group of people. And so that's kind of what's happening here. You see some people wearing these masks looking to go unidentified. I think you're seeing that right now. People looking to shield their faces from the cameras. Others are holding signs that say "Stand Up for America" and denouncing some of the so-called free speech folks. A lot of other people here just watching, taking in the scene, seeing what's next. But these folks have emptied out onto Charles Street as far as I can see. And it looks like it's continuing toward Boston Police. Looks like Boston Police, there's a truck up ahead there. I'm trying to get a better viewpoint. It's hard to see from our location as I make my way into the street. It looks like Boston Police. You see a number of vehicles there, and so people are just kind of milling about in the street here. And this is Charles Street we're on. Of course, Charles Street is closed now with all of these folks out here emptying onto the street. And you see Boston Police trucks driving away as well. And so this is the scene here. It's a little bit of a, I don't want to say chaotic scene, but it's definitely what I saw was a number of people pushing out and I'm sorry about some of the expletives you're hearing. I'm in the crowd. We see a number of pedal officers as well headed that way. I'm going to head over back toward the sidewalk area. It appears as though whatever prompted that is gone now. People are walking back inside relatively peacefully. Again, it appears as though this originated in the area of the Parkman Bandstand, and a number of people were just pushing and shoving and yelling expletives. And it appeared as though some of the counter-protesters were pushing out some of the so-called free speech protesters. And that's what I can tell you is happening. All these people are now starting to make their way back into the common, it appears. Some are leaving, some it appears as though are just trying to get out. And some are walking back in, you know, as this unity rally and march makes its way toward the common. Again, the police commissioner telling me about 15,000 people. 15,000 people making their way toward this area.
Sharman,
yes, I can hear you.
We are looking at Sky 7 HD just to maybe give you a better idea. I know it's tough to see from your vantage point, but the bandstand appears to be empty. It looks like all of the people who are there from the Boston Free Speech Coalition for that rally have left. So I'm guessing, I know you said a lot of that activity was around the bandstand area. It very well could have been people in the crowd reacting to the members of the Free Speech Coalition leaving, because there's nobody on the bandstand right now as we look live at Sky 7 HD.
Right, in that rally.
Well, that certainly makes sense. We are out on the area near Charles Street and just surrounded by all of these people. And it was almost like, I mean, just a huge group of people just rushing out, pushing some of the likely free speech the members of the Free Speech Coalition out onto the street, essentially chasing them out of Boston Common. That's certainly what it appeared to me to be like. It looks like people are making their way back in, though, relatively peacefully. And we're expecting that march. I'm sure Sky 7 has great shots of that march as they make their way up Charles Street into Boston Common.
Yeah, and Sharman, it should be noted as well that the original permit for this group was for them to be gathering there at the bandstand from 12 until 2. We also know that they were late in getting started, and it's clearly not 2, it's just coming up on 1 o'clock. So they've clearly decided to wrap up early. They've left. We know that they didn't get the numbers that they were expecting, about 40 to 60 by estimation from our crews out in the field. Weren't very verbose when it came to talking about why they were there or what their cause or their message was. We want to bring in Tim Caputo right now, who's there. And Tim, did you see these folks leaving?
Yeah, Chris, actually, we were just trying to position ourselves around the other side. You see the look at the bandstand now. They walked out of there pretty darn quickly. You know, this was supposed to go until 2 o'clock this afternoon, but obviously with such a small crowd inside that secure area in the bandstand area and such a gigantic crowd that's only getting bigger outside, I think after, an hour and a half or so in the hot sun, they decided to call it quits. You know, keeping in mind as well, this was supposed to be a much bigger crowd out here. This was supposed to start at noon, but they were allowed in there a little bit early, closer to 11 o'clock this morning.
meet up with the other protesters that have been walking all morning from the Roxbury area again to show solidarity. Again, our observations so far this morning have been very peaceful. Now, we're going to keep an eye on this as we continue to move. I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of police officers. There's also some security marshals that have been brought in. You can see one of them here with the green vest and a first aid kit as well. They are going to be on the outskirts. You can see some of them now down there trying to corral the crowd in and keep them contained to keep any other problems or any other clashes happening here throughout the morning. But again, so far, there have been no major observations. We're going to continue to walk with this demonstration. We'll check back with you folks in a little while. Back to you.
Mike Lacrosse showing us Wiggy, the great diffuser here. If we could go back to Mike, as Tiffany Chan is on the scene as well. Yeah, Tiffany, what are you seeing out there right now?
It's this.
What do you see? What do you see?
They're going to go extinct, just as the United States Census Bureau. Why don't you people read? Why do you feel the white thing is under attack? Why do I care? I'm asking why you feel it is. All right. Well, the same reason that people cared that we were loading up trains in Germany a few years ago. They care about survival.
This man is
genocide.
Do you agree? You're unsure what she did. You're unsure. You're saying that that's what happened in their mind. Sure.
I'm not doing it. So you white supremacist, sir? No, thank you. You're not? You know what white supremacists? Do you know any white supremacists? Why do people keep saying this? What's the difference between you and a white supremacist? Explain.
I don't know. What's the Black Lives Matter folks? We've seen obviously a lot of folks coming out here with the thought or intention that the free speech group was going to be Nazi sympathizers or anti-Semites or some sort of white supremacist. The group itself never claimed that. They never said that they had any association with that. When I asked them what exactly they were coming out here to talk about, they said to have the ability to have free speech. But obviously the folks here concerned about what happened down in Virginia over the weekend wanted to make it clear, regardless of what they stood for or what they wanted to admit they stood for, they wanted to come out here to make sure their voices were heard. And I think you got it here. You heard it loud and clear. Tens of thousands of people, and even more coming. And it's going to be surprising to see when these folks who have walked all afternoon in the heat to come here to protest this rally that happened at the bandstand are going to get here and realize this protest didn't even last a couple hours, and it was maybe 20 to 40 people deep at best, and those folks didn't even get to interact with a whole lot of people. But ultimately, if this is what they wanted, which is a strong showing of tens of thousands of people to show what this city's about, to show what New England's about, they got exactly what they asked for. And a lot of people out here very happy they were able to voice their opinions, express their feelings, and get their emotions out there, especially at a time where everyone's really on edge, especially after what happened down in Virginia last weekend.
All right, and I'm sorry, someone's telling me something. I'm not quite.
We're going to go to 7 Charmin Sacchetti. We can see her here. And Charmin, I know there was some commotion, it seems, when the group was leaving the common area. What are you seeing now? What's happening here?
Yeah, it appears as though we just saw, you remember Commissioner Evans had mentioned there would not be police officers in riot gear, but they would be at the ready. Well, that's what we're seeing right here now. We see police officers wearing their helmets and carrying their batons and in protective gear. And this is, of course, they're walking, it appears as though, down Charles Street. Now, this is the route that some of the marchers who began in Roxbury are taking. And so that's what's happening. That's what's happening here right now. They're just walking at this point. That's what they're doing. Some people are cheering on the sidelines. And this is, it appears as though an attempt to clear this street a bit, make sure after some of the concerned people who who rushed out of the common. So this is something that police didn't want to necessarily bring out, but appears as though it's a force. They're showing that they're here, and they're walking into the common right now, just where we saw that large group rush out. Now, again, the majority of the police officers here are not dressed like this. This is a special team that they're bringing in. It's unclear if they're coming in to clear some areas off or if it's just a show of force, but that's what's happening right now. They're walking right by us here on Charles Street.
Okay, this is a really good time. We're going to stay on these pictures to see what transpires here. Sharman, thank you. I want to bring in our security expert, Todd McGee. He's been watching this. Todd, we know that this the controversial group has left. They've left the bandstand. I'm thinking police are saying it's time to shut this down at this point. If the reason you're here is gone, it's time to end this thing.
We've got reports of thousands of people around the bandstand. If there's any of the original protesters that pulled the permit are behind, that's also a concern for their safety to move them out without any further incidents. Additionally, if there is a massive crowd that the police are concerned about that may be becoming a little bit more rambunctious in their counter protest, then that's also another reason to deploy these mobile forces here that we see. So this is just a part of what was part of the contingency planning that Boston Police has put in place. So again, here we'll see what will transpire, but it looks like they're just positioning at this point. There doesn't appear to be anything of urgency that's at place. So you can tell just by the movement, they're just really moving from where they were staged more into the bandstand area.
Todd, the rally was supposed to continue until 2 o'clock. Obviously, it's ended much sooner. The Boston Free Speech Coalition, the people who arrived there for that free speech rally, have left the bandstand. As far as Boston police are concerned at this point, are they going to want to wrap this up as quickly as possible? Do they want to keep these counter-protesters out there in the common, or is that why we're seeing these police in riot gear? Are they going to want to move in and try and get people to go home now at this point?
That's a real good point, Chris. At this stage where the main event really was an undersell. It never got off. It never transpired. At least it is what was originally predicted. It does appear that Boston Police may be preparing to just move the crowd along, move them from the area, and then try to create an opportunity for them to disperse, and hopefully people will go home and peace will continue throughout this dispersal.
You know, I'm wondering here as well, you know, we have to consider the content. We've been talking all day about what exactly this free speech rally entailed. We have one of our reporters who was just showing us a Periscope that was done by the organizer of this group by the name of Kyle Chapman, a very controversial figure. He was Periscoping from inside the bandstand. So lest there be any confusion as to who was in attendance, we do have confirmation through this Periscope that Kyle Chapman was indeed there and has left the scene. And just to give you a little bit of background about this person and why these counter-protesters were so concerned here, this is a person who was a protester at a Berkeley, California rally as well, and as the reports go, smashed a wooden post over the head of another counter-protester there. So this is probably, when you hear about these particular individuals, controversial figures being present, I'm wondering if this also is another red flag to police, Todd. I mean, they knew that the potential was here, but when you hear about a person who, you know, describes himself as a new alt-right Fight Club member, this is obviously going to add a little bit more scrutiny to the situation.
When we had reports earlier from the field about the Fusion Center being involved, Fusion Center is going to provide essential intelligence as to the different players, different people that are national figures from the alt-right side, and also in the counter counter-protester side, there are individuals that study and research some of these violent individuals. So there is a chance for that clash of both sides to happen. So if a particular individual known as a part of a hate group, then yes, Boston Police, again, required to maintain safety and public order. If they need to remove some of these smaller protesters that are remaining behind, that may be another reason why we're seeing the Special Emergency Response Team from Boston Police go into position.
I wanted to ask you, because we were talking with Steve Cooper earlier, who was talking with local law enforcement and some of the planning. And yes, they were concerned, he says, about the rally itself, but one of their greater concerns was after the rally, when it was over, getting them out, which it seems like those initial free speech protesters have left the scene. But there are people mixed amongst the crowd. You mentioned some of the people who may not have the best intentions showing up to these rallies on both sides. And actually, we do want to bring in Steve Cooper. Todd, we'll get back to you in just a moment. But we want to get back out to Steve, where we're seeing police. We're looking at video from moments ago, Steve, of police in their riot gear. And there you are live.
Right, and this is what I was talking about, Chris and Krista. Right now, the Boston Police have come out. This is the tactical team. We told you earlier that they were going to try to keep these tactical officers back from the scene. But as you mentioned, as things broke up at the bandstand, and the speakers or the people that have come here to the bandstand and now have come out to this area of Boylston Street, just off of the Common, you can see what's happening right now. This is the tactical team. They're using great restraint right now. Standing here, they've set up a line, and they're just standing here in the middle of Boylston Street. They have their tactical gear on, and there's now a state police helicopter overhead here. But what's happening now is this is exactly what we're told that Boston Police were hoping to avoid. They were hoping to keep the protesters and the counter-protesters apart from each other. But as that small group broke up from the bandstand, they sort of converged here on Boylston Street. And that's what you're looking at right now, these live pictures right now. And again, you heard earlier Boston Police Commissioner Bill Evans saying that they were sort of going to try to keep it with police not in any tactical gear. But this is the group that has arrived on the scene now. They just mounted up and they're now in a position standing here face to face with a number of protesters who are they're sort of staring down right now. There's a woman in the middle right now. She has a bandana over most of her face. She's chanting, and people are sort of converging in this area. Boston Police brought a motorcycle team a little bit early trying to break up this crowd. But this is sort of where people have ended up at this point.
All right, so Steve, stay with us. I want to bring in our security analyst because he knows what he's looking at clearly. Todd McGee, I'm assuming this is not a decision that police take lightly, because once you bring out TAC teams, that sends a visual symbol, if you will. So tell us a little bit more about what led them to this decision here.
So we are seeing the deployment of the tactical team, the Special Emergency Response Team, and there must be a concern that's been indicated from the command post, and so Boston Police are staged closer than where they were before. This is critical to understand that, again, there's a concern. So again, right now they're at the ready. They have not been deployed, but they are in position in the event that they need to disperse the crowd. So hopefully we won't see any more force than what we're seeing here now with the presence of the Special Emergency Response Team, but certainly a concern has been indicated.
All right, and Todd, I just want to follow up on this as well, because at this point, they're saying this protest is shut down, and if anybody is still lingering, are they subject to arrest under, what is it, unlawful assembly?
Unlawful assembly. At this point, I wouldn't say that there's any concern for arrest unless individuals become unruly. You probably will see this team at some point be deployed to move the crowd along to clear the area. But again, we saw earlier we have a 2-mile essentially roving March in regards to this, where we had streets shut down. So again, there may be additional resources that are needed in the event that this particular team or squad, if you will, of tactical members are tasked with other assignments. So you may see state police with our special emergency response team come in as well in order to bring and maintain order.
All right, Todd, and we're going to bounce back and forth with you and Steve, because I know, Steve, you were talking with some of your law enforcement sources, and they mentioned, obviously, there's the concern during the rally itself about keeping the peace, but you mentioned also that it was after the rally was complete, which is where we are right now, that was one of their big concerns, was keeping people safe once this thing wrapped up. And it seems like that's one of the big reasons they put on that tactical gear.
Right, and they were ready a lot earlier, hours ago. We saw them mounting up, but as we mentioned, Commissioner Evans sort of wanted to keep them back, and that's sort of what happened here. But as the speakers began to leave and they were escorted off of the bandstand, and keep in mind there were those metal barriers that we showed you earlier that were in place. They sort of tried to bring some of the participants out here through Boylston Street and to get them out of the area. And as that was happening, the counter-protesters that had been here much earlier realized that that's what was going on where we're situated, and they began to come over here. And that's what, as you're looking over off to my left and your right, you can see, again, a lot of the counter-protesters with the signs there. Boston police backing up one of their transport vehicles a little back towards the area where they were escorting those people out. And they may now be trying to get the original people that were at the free speech rally, maybe they may be taking them out in a transport vehicle instead, because what was bringing them out here wasn't working, obviously. And you have a lot of tension here right now. A lot of people, the crowds are closing in. We've seen some people throwing bottles, water bottles. We've seen some people taking water and sort of spraying it on some of the people that were at that rally. But again, right now you can see sort of where this face-off is going on behind us here, and there you see the tactical team that we were talking about. They are just standing in position. They have their batons in hand, some of them with their faces covered with those masks. They're looking straight ahead. They have a leader here, obviously a command staff person who they're getting their instructions from. But you can see right now they're sort of not standing down, but they're certainly standing by and waiting, and they're just beyond where we are right now. I'm looking beyond us, and there's a second group of tactical teams just beyond us. But some of the people that were sort of yelling at these police officers have sort of backed off, and so this tense moment here may have been head off briefly here. But again, the focus right now is to try to get the people that were at the free speech rally that were on the bandstand. And again, they kept them apart from the counter protesters, and you saw all the chanting going on from where Tim Caputo was earlier. The effort was to get them out of here. And as you mentioned earlier, this was supposed to end at 2 o'clock. And here we are a little bit after 1 o'clock. And perhaps maybe it was the fact that it wasn't as many people as they thought they were going to have for the free speech rally. But now the effort is to get them out of here and get them out of here safely. And again, right now, this tactical team that we said was standing by a few blocks away, we saw them earlier this morning, sort of in standby mode. They were obviously called out. And within a matter of minutes, when they realized things were getting tense here on Boylston Street, right on this side of the common, they marched into position, and now they are standing by, waiting for their next directive, I guess, at this point.
Right, and Steve, again, stay with us. We're going to bring in Todd McGee again, and this is kind of interesting to watch as well. I mean, your initial gut reaction is you're hoping people just go home, because it takes just one person, one misguided instinct, and things could, turn negative. So tell us a little bit more about what the next phase is here. Do you see mounted police maybe coming through at some point once they've given, a specific time that this should break up, that they come through to try to break up the crowd as well?
Sure. So based on what Steve just reported, again, we're seeing the crowd probably getting a little bit more rambunctious. You saw the removal of some of the original protesters. So based on their removal and trying to provide safety for them, it looks like the crowd responded with their movement. And as they're exiting the bandstand, the crowd responded with what appeared to be tossing of bottles, and that would be the impetus to bring out this this special emergency response team. So again, we can still see for the most part they're staged as opposed to being fully mobilized. So again, hopefully the crowd would just maintain itself, self-police, and without any type of disorder. We've had a peaceful event so far, and we'd hate to see that Boston Police mobilize anything greater.
Todd, you've been talking all morning long about the people on both sides who may not be there for the right reasons. And when you see that aggression toward police who are assembling in their gear, their tactical gear, and throwing the water bottles and verbal confrontations and aggression, is that one of the things you were concerned with seeing here, that maybe the people who weren't there for the right reasons today could cause this to escalate?
Absolutely. There are professional agitators that look for events like this. They are not on either side of the ideology or the free speech. They're just there to agitate. They're just there to exploit a peaceful protest. Again, whether you agree with the ideology or not, there are members that oftentimes go overlooked. And what happens now is police are going to have to determine and use really good discernment as to who the problem people are. So if they are mobilized, you'll see a very deliberate extraction of specific individuals that are creating some type of escalating some type of havoc here. So again, watching Boston Police here staged. They haven't been fully deployed yet, but they are in position in the event that things start to escalate.
And you talk about these professional agitators, and it's not even necessarily a rally like this that draws people out like that. I remember years ago in Maryland covering a Maryland's Terrapin NCAA, game. And so the same kind of thing, you see folks, it's time to go home. They bring in the horses first. They make their presence known. And that's when we noticed that the minute they started bringing out the bottles, and that's when the powder pellets, that was the non-lethal force that police used in that particular instance. As a police officer, you do have to show a huge amount of restraint in situations like this, regardless of what the context is that has brought people there.
Well, absolutely. In what you're seeing here is a show of force with tactical uniforms and tactical equipment with riot batons, and you don't know who's in the crowd. The professional agitators are experts at hiding in plain sight, blending in, and they'll have their own cues as to when, if they're there, they'll have their own cues as to when to create and escalate a disturbance. So law enforcement's been trained, but again, you've got good people there that were there for legitimate reasons on the counter-protest side that just wanted to come out, express their sentiment for peace and to denounce hatred. But again, you have groups such as the professional agitators that will try to exploit these particular events.
What are Bill Evans and his team doing, the commissioner? What are they doing right now? And at what point are they giving people a chance to disperse on their own? At what point do they say, okay, it's time for everybody to go home and start making that effort? What do you think they're doing right now strategy-wise? So right now there's communication at the command post. If there's any intelligence that we're unaware of, but is being shared at a law enforcement level, that's being shared. If there's, again, we talked earlier about a local, state, and federal level of response, working in conjunction with the JTTF, working in conjunction with the Fusion Center. So again, this is a massive operation that's underway here, and this is the force element that we're seeing displayed right now. So again, they haven't been mobilized, which is a good thing. It appears that the crowd is either self-policing or slowly dispersing from the particular area. But again, the main concern was getting the safety of the original protesters of the freedom speech, getting their safety, getting them removed from the area in order to minimize any potential emotional outbursts from the protest side, from the counter-protest side.
And the other thing too is in the spirit of encouraging people to go home, they would probably work with folks from the MBTA. We were talking about some stations being shut down. We might see those potentially reopening as well, along with street openings as well too.
Logistically, from the MBTA, you may see some type of equipment logistically being deployed in the form of buses. So if there are some restrictions from the rail side of the MBTA operation, then perhaps you may see a sense of bus being supportive in order to move people out of the main area of the city.
Do you see them closing off any of the access roads to the Common? I know when you had that 2-mile stretch, you mentioned the logistical challenges of trying to police a 2-mile stretch with 10,000 plus people. Do you see them potentially shutting down the roads to keep more people from coming into the Common? Because obviously now they probably would like people to go in the opposite direction and disperse from that area.
Absolutely. Now what you have is bringing a sense of order to tens of thousands of people that have assembled on the Common now. So where the original counter-protesters have started, there's nothing there. Maybe small people gathered, but we see the majority of the crowd here that's emerged upon the Common. And now with that being said, you have the concern of their safety to avoid situations like we saw last week with a motor vehicle taking out innocent bystanders standing around in this particular assembly.
Right. So police are on the move here, Todd, and we've also seen State Police Air Wing overhead as well. So when you talk about this being a multi-agency effort, you're not kidding. We have state police, local TAC teams, and you said the FBI as well. Do you see them more as helping matters in the run-up to the preparation, or are they actively involved right now as well?
There certainly would be a federal level of federal presence from the FBI specifically. Again, you have some of these individuals that you mentioned earlier that are really national players, and they've got a certain reputation. And if they're organized and have a way to communicate to their base, they know how to mobilize their base. So the FBI are concerned about individuals connected with terrorism. Based on their ideology, and again, here we see large crowds of people, obviously, that are converged here in the Commons, and so you want to have that FBI level of intelligence that's being shared with both local and state levels of law enforcement.
All right. Todd, I know you're going to stick with us, and we're seeing some movement here, so I think this might be a good time to bring back in 7 Steve Cooper. I know, Steve, you've been talking with your law enforcement officials throughout this whole ordeal just to try and get updates here. Where do we stand? Have Boston police given an order yet for people to leave the Common area, or are we still in a holding pattern?
No violence, no violence.
Okay, it looks like, Steve is right there in the mix. And, you've heard Tim Caputo and others talking about the fact that there's been a dialogue here. And that's what this right to protest is all about, is creating a meaningful dialogue. And it sounds like Steve is right there. We see the back of his head there. And he's right there as people are talking about this. No violence, no violence. And thank goodness that's not what we've seen today. Steve, can you hear us?
Yeah, again, sorry about that. You can see this is the tactical team that you were watching a little bit earlier that's now moved into position here a little bit closer to the... And what they've done is, this is the area, Boylston Street on this side of the Common, closest to the bandstand where that free speech rally was going on. And as we mentioned, what was happening here is, as it sort of broke up, police were trying to bring those participants out here through the Boylston Street side. And really just a short time ago, there weren't a lot of people here. But as the counter-protesters arrived from Roxbury and looked down Boylston Street, they could see the crowds gathering. And so basically what you had is first they had motorcycles sort of move through the area, but a short time later, as the crowds quickly grew, what you had the tactical teams arrive into position. They were literally a block away. That's where they had mounted up, and that's where they were sort of standing by earlier this morning. And now what's happened is, with their batons, they're sort of creating this barrier here, if you will, because on the Common you saw those metal barriers, but now what you have is the tactical team, special operations here, set up with their helmets on and their batons, and they're sort of creating a second wall, if you will, and they were just instructed to come over here, to closer to this area where they were trying to get the protesters, or the people that were part of the free speech rally, to get them out of here safely. And this is sort of what we've been talking about all morning long and into the afternoon. Boston police wanted to keep the protesters and the counter-protesters apart, but this is where they sort of converged earlier, and we saw some people throwing water and tossing plastic water bottles at some of these protesters. And right now, at this point, the tactical team has sort of set up. They're working with the uniformed officers, Boston Police, in those yellow vests. And I think they're trying to get the last people from the free speech rally out of the area to diffuse some of this tension that we're seeing right now. Boston Police getting the assistance of the State Police Air Wing, which just is now literally hovering over this section of Boylston Street right here. And so far, there have been no arrests here. There have been a lot of sort of screaming confrontation between the two sides. A lot of people that were standing around. There's a lot of elbow pushing and people wearing bandanas over their face. But it's sort of a holding pattern here right now with that extra police presence that we knew was in the area. And now they've certainly moved into position and made themselves known at this point. But so far, every time things begin to get tense, some of the people, the counter-protesters, ask people to sort of calm down and diffuse this on their own. And this is exactly what Boston Police are hoping for. They practice crowd control, and this is what you're seeing right here. There's a lot of people in close proximity right now standing by here with this police helicopter overhead. There's a pretty good view, and they're able to get information down to the command staff on the ground to help them decide how to move. Boston Police also have their bicycle unit here, and they're sort of in position as well. They've set up a sort of a barrier with their bicycles, if you will. So at this point, nobody's getting any closer to the Boston Common and to this exit where they've been trying to get the handful of protesters out of here. And again, we're hearing people on megaphones urging people to stand here and chant, but no violence here. And that's sort of what we're seeing right now. We're asking people to take it easy out here. It's a warm day out here right now. People have been out here on the Common for the past couple of hours. And now these counter-protesters are urging everyone for no violence as the free speech attendees sort of try to get out of here safely. We talked to a few of them earlier, and they just want to get out of here safely. But this is sort of the area where I think police are hoping to diffuse any trouble today.
All right. We'll give Steve a break because it is very loud, so he's not going to be able to hear our questions anyway. But maybe we could bring Todd McGee back in now just to pick up a little bit on what Steve was saying and the strategies that Boston Police are incorporating at this point right now. If you want to share your thoughts, Todd.
Sure. So it did look and appear as if the concern was getting some of the last bit of the protesters out from the freedom of speech group that requested the permit to assemble. So it did appear that there was some emotions that got escalated somewhat in trying to move and remove the remaining individuals that were in the bandstand. It appeared that things needed to get a little bit more under control. Also, we see some buses that have been deployed. It looks like logistically MBTA has furnished some buses to try and move the masses and try and help get some of the people out of the area here as the protests begin to wind down.
Could I ask you a technical question real quickly, Todd? From my recollection and just reading here, the mounted police unit for Boston Police disbanded a while ago, but we did see some officers on horseback. Were they associated with another agency maybe?
That is perhaps one of the issues where state police may have picked up part of a support role. My understanding is that based on the agencies that would be involved in a city event like this, the next mounted patrol would be state police to provide such a resource. That being said, it could be a condition where the horses in their use and deployment, they may have been maybe exhausted their amount of time out there and another group has taken place. So working with animals, either canine or horses in the mounted unit fashion, you have to also take into consideration the exhaustion levels on a warm day such as this for the animals as well.
Right.
And for the police officers, you mentioned how key it is for them to stay hydrated.
Why did you make the trip up here? And what has your experience been so far? When you see that?
Actually, I'm an activist, but I was planning on working on my friend's campaign. There's a special election Tuesday in Newport, Rhode Island. But my friend actually, who's not as active as I am, she suggested we come here. And we just felt like even though they told us not to come, to play it safe, you know, you can't right now. Now's the time to be visible. We should not be repeating the 60s. And it turned into a big love fest, and that's what should have happened.
Thanks, Mari. And there are literally hundreds of people that made their way to the protest that we were at for about 2 hours down here to the center of the Common. And we've seen folks from different walks of life, all ages, different backgrounds. And a lot of the folks were kind of shocked when they did get down here and they observed the bandstand. This is where the free speech rally was set to happen. I spoke with some police officers off camera. They told me there was only about 24 people inside of that area where you can see the bike clubs lining it up. They were there for about an hour, I'm told, and there were no major issues with anybody going in and out. But again, I want to go and show you just how large this crowd is. This is the Stand for Solidarity counter demonstration that was up by the State House portion of the Common for about 2 hours. They've been here now. People are continuing to speak and chant. No major issues down here. People are happy to see the large amount of police officers that are here keeping them safe. When I asked a lot of the folks what they were most excited to see, besides unit, they were excited to see the fact that the city was here protecting them. I heard you guys talking about the weather conditions earlier, and I can give you a first-hand testimony that it is hot out here, and there's a lot of water, but there's just so much energy from people down here. They just grab a bottle of water and keep on going. There are some first aid folks around here as well trying to help people with our issues. We'll send it back to you guys in the studio.
Good to know. Thank you so much, Mike, for that update. And just to give you a quick recap and a timeline, we are at 1:30 in the afternoon on this Saturday. We have been following for you and bringing you live images of this counter-protest that was planned to protest a free speech rally that was set to go off at 12 noon on Parkman Bandstand. We know that since about an hour ago, this rally has appeared to have fallen apart. Only a couple of dozen people from our Mike LaCrosse, who spoke to police officers on the ground, showed up and then left. And what is sending a bigger message are the thousands of people who have come together to march through the streets and stand up against white supremacy, stand up against hate, and what they call have a voice for the groups who are marginalized. We've been talking about the weather conditions. I've been checking the observations from the National Weather Service out of Boston, and those dew points and temperatures have been really close together. That means that they've been doing this in 100% humidity. They trekked 2 miles to Boston Common. Christina Hager is at Boston Common, and she has been talking to counter-protesters gathered there, not far from the Parkman Bandstand. Christina, what can you tell us is happening at this moment?
Well, at this point, it seems people are slowly moving out of the Common, or just at the very least, a weight has been lifted here where people are kind of dancing and playing drums, and it's a much lighter mood than it was, less tense before. Now, the people who were involved with the free speech rally in the bandstand have left, and perhaps that's why the tension has been lifted, because there's nothing here to for counter-protesters to protest. But what it amounted to really was some Trump supporters, and the only reason you could tell they were Trump supporters is if they were wearing Trump jerseys or Make America Great Again, the red baseball hats. And sometimes that would instigate a discussion out here on the Common. And you could see that people were trying very hard to keep it peaceful because they knew that this is a very sensitive situation. Sometimes that just didn't work. Sometimes emotions boiled over, and as I poked my head over a few times to hear what was going on, I found myself in situations where people were starting to throw punches and chanting, just kind of surrounding people. It's a mob of people out here, so they were kind of surrounding people, and police did have to get involved in those situations and get people safely in and out of here. Now, the free speech rally was going on the bandstand in the middle of the Common here, and there are a couple of rings of barricades here, and there's a long sort of alleyway there on a couple of different sides, and this is how participants were coming and going. And as they did so, the crowd, they had to walk through a crowd of protesters shouting and chanting at them, and they stayed in there. They were scheduled to stay in there from noon till 2 o'clock. They some of them came before noon. They were supposed to start organizing at 10. I would say they came here, started at around 11, and they were out of here by 1 p.m. So things wrapped up sooner than they had expected, perhaps because there really weren't very many people in that bandstand. A lot of the scheduled speakers had pulled out because of what happened in Charlottesville, and then even after that because of being associated with this movement that they were afraid would be connected with other more extreme movements. So there were fewer people in that bandstand actually participating in this rally than expected, and perhaps that's why this wrapped up sooner than later. They maybe ran out of speakers. Some of the people who just wanted to go to listen in and kind of participate in the rally but weren't scheduled speakers had expressed that they weren't able to get near there, either because there was just so much confusion about how to enter or because there were so many protesters that they personally didn't feel safe. A lot of police presence here, though, trying to keep this as safe as possible, but also encouraging people to sort of keep a distance, let these people have their freedom of speech, but also keep a safe distance so that things didn't get too heated. Outside the barricade, though, things did get heated a couple of times. Thankfully, nothing that we witnessed was too bad. Just some shoving, some name calling, some pushing, and at this point, people seem to be kind of celebrating, frankly, and making their way out of the common. I know you talked about the temperature and how this might affect it. It is very, we seem to be just sitting here with the sun beating down on us, and now that people have left and this crowd has thinned out, we can feel a little breeze coming through, and it feels a lot lighter, a lot better, and perhaps that will be reflected in the mood of the crowd here. That's the latest from Boston Common. Back to you guys.
You know, it all boils down to you have to have a rally to have a counter rally, and BPD has just confirmed on Twitter that the free speech rally is officially over.
Yes, and we're taking a live look now at what appears to be a meeting point here between what looks like riot police and a crowd of people. We don't know exactly what's happening, words that are being exchanged, why they are gathered at this particular point, but we continue to watch this counter-protest unfold. Cheryl, go ahead. And right now, as Christina says, as folks start to disperse, and if this free speech part of this rally, which was the catalyst for all of the counter protests and the solidarity groups and everybody coming together, now that that is dissipated, as she said, she's nervous that the tensions
on the air for a couple of hours now, and it's certainly been an interesting day. This whole day began at the Reggie Lewis Center, one corner of Boston. The other corner was right there on the Common where people were on the bandstand, and now they're moving forward. Yeah. And the question is,
how do you push forward?
How do you push forward, and why are they pushing forward?
Because that vehicle, they're trying to get the vehicle out of there. That's what they're trying to do.
And
they're trying to create a path for that.
Okay.
Now see how they have tried to create the wedge. So they're still brandishing their sticks there, Professor Leonard.
Well, apparently it looks like there's a confrontation between a crowd that wants to show its antipathy to the occupants of those wagons, and this is exactly what the police don't want, is for them to become the point of friction, for them to have to interact in a negative way with either of the crowds. But they need to get these folks out.
That's right.
Because the last thing you need is to have these people remaining downtown.
And
but there looks like there's a little pushback here.
Right. Yeah, but that vehicle is moving slow. There's some, you can see one person in that T-shirt up over his head.
This is exactly what the police are worried about. That there might have been a few people who showed up who are looking to make trouble. And that may be what we're seeing here.
So then what happens next? And as we watch this whole thing unfold right here on Boylston Street, and we see a line of armed police, and we see these vans that are trying to make their way through the crowds, and some of the crowd, they are pushing back here. And it has been a couple of hours of a lot of people protesting and counter-protesting and peaceful protests. And now we're seeing this end of it now.
The police will want to be patient and will be trying to keep this low-key.
Look at the vehicle at the top of your screen, Professor Laird. That's a massive, that's just there to occupy space. Police say that the rally is over and the demonstrators have left the Common, so they're asking people to, there's a grab, there's contact between the line. and there's some fast pushback here.
So
they're obviously trying to create the lane for the vehicle to get through, and there's a flashpoint. There are a number of flashpoints along that perimeter.
This would be a good point for the police to be trying to figure out a different way to take them out and just avoid this altogether.
There was a punch through.
What the police are doing now is trying to extract the people they see as the principal troublemakers.
So what they're doing is trying to single out those who might be the more aggressive in the middle of this.
Exactly. And so their training is to try to defuse this situation rather than to escalate it, and to try to identify individual people who are particularly active and to pull them out of the crowd.
So we probably won't be seeing at this point, based on what we're looking at right here, a lot of arrests. That's not the goal initially, unless it escalates to that.
They would prefer to avoid that entirely.
See, one person has stepped out now to verbally challenge police.
Right. So again, this is exactly what the police don't.
They're going to move forward, but he's moving back.
That they become the point of either the point of contact or the issue in themselves. That people in the crowd decide that the police are being too aggressive or whatever.
So again, live pictures right here as the police have officially said this rally is over. People have left the bandstand, and I think they would like all of this to come to an end. But at this point, we have a lot of people in the city of Boston who have just marched, who have protested, counter-protested.
What's going to observe is that all the violence.
And they seem to have held a little more, although now the police are more actively pushing it back. And there's one person now who is down on the ground. They have taken that one person.
And we see state police there on the ground as well. So this is Boston police, and now you just see the state trooper right there, right by the breaking news banner right there.
Their intent, obviously, is to create the space for that van to get through.
Oh, and now it's dispersing.
Yeah, it is thinner, isn't it?
Yep.
It is thinner, but there's still a hot spot right in the middle. That one man is back again. So there is still a hot spot right in the middle.
What were you going to say, Professor?
Say again, Professor?
What would be really helpful at this point would be for somebody in the crowd that's confronting the police to say, this is actually not good for us. This is because what the far right is going to claim is that the free speech demonstration was shut down, and then the crowd tried to attack the speakers as they were leaving, and that all the violence is from one side here. We didn't see anything, at least that we've been able to identify, that you would say was perpetrated by hate groups here. And these are all people who say they're against the hate groups, but the way they're behaving is actually a very different image.
In fact, what we did see is the free speech group walked right off the bandstand and just walked away. And they're still trying to get away.
Right. And I also think it's important to note here is that this appears to be a faction.
Very small.
Okay, a very small group of people who are challenging. I think it is in some respects.
Part of the march.
And they were not part of the march. And so I want to make that clear. Is that
well, do we know that?
I want to be clear that this is a faction of individuals. This is not about the leadership of the march that came from Roxbury to the Boston Common. We don't know who these individuals are or where they came from. And so I also don't want the narrative to be that the people came from Roxbury and marched to the Common and then there was violence. That is not what I believe we're seeing here. And so again, I agree. I think that this is very concerning to see on the screen. This is a very small group of counter protesters, it appears to be, who are probably in that group that we've been talking about, who just came for chaos. And that is not what we're about.
But they seem to be moving a little more briskly at this point, where maybe a block or two into the movement, it seems to be moving forward a little quicker. There's a flashpoint on the right.
Get clear that these people who it looks like when they're coming up against the police and police are coming up against them, there's a scene behind the police that we should remind you of, and it appears that those are some of these free speech speakers who are on that bandstand, and they are in those vans trying to leave the city of Boston, and perhaps that is what has been creating these situations right here, right now. Pardon me.
Dutch, I see a lot of people with hands up. That's a signal that
Good.
That's a signal with my hands are clear, right?
Right. That I don't have a weapon.
I have nothing.
That I'm not opposing you. Right.
And again, there were strict rules here. No sticks, no weapons, and the list goes on and on and on.
But see, what's an interesting point to that discussion, Maria, is that yes, that encompasses the area around the common.
Right.
But where is the barrier? Where is the wall? Where do you draw the wall?
Right.
And I would imagine at this point in time, we're beyond the wall here.
Yeah. So again, as we look at these live pictures, and police are trying to move these people through, and like Ed just said, people have their hands up, and they're just trying to get these vans through, and there's pushback and push forward on both sides here.
Here's the guy in a red shirt, that you just mentioned, that Professor, that maybe someone in the crowd can do it. He's trying to walk through and create space, move forward.
So again, the concern about events like this is that in spite of the best efforts of the organizers, they become a platform for other people with a different agenda. Mm-hmm. And so we don't know whether these people marched here from Roxbury or not, but they don't look to be a part of the march, which declared itself not to be about this kind of activity. And there have been people who've said that they believe in the violent opposition of anti-hate groups. And this may be some of those people who have showed up with that agenda in mind. And this seems to them like their opportunity. Now, the unfortunate thing is that puts them against the police, who are simply trying to protect the safety of the speakers who came here and are now trying to leave.
Certainly a powerful image, but again, a reminder that it really is just a sliver of the day, that we had people coming from Roxbury and marching. It appeared to be peacefully, and we had people at the State House, the same thing. And we had skirmishes all around the city, but it is important to point that out.
Yeah, they're going through
people.
I'm sorry, say it again.
We had tens and tens of thousands of people out here today, of whom we're looking at maybe 50 here who are causing trouble.
And it can just be a mob mentality kind of breaking out, that they might not have an agenda going in, they just happens.
And as you can see, there are a number of police vans that are trying to make it through. Not just the one that we saw at the very beginning, but there are a number of them now.
And now it looks like they're in a much more open space.
Much more easily, yeah.
That was a really cramped area, and to try to get people out and the vans out.
That's right. As you head into I believe that's Washington Street that runs right of your screen, left of your screen.
Yes.
So that
downtown crossing, right?
Where
right?
the registry. How many times have you been to the registry there?
The challenges is
too many times.
We didn't actually.
So again, live pictures right now where things took a little bit of a hot turn there and heated up a little bit. And now it looks like police have that under control. And as those people were still standing there, and they're trying to get those other people out. And it was certainly an eventful day in the city of Boston. Boston police tweeting out just a short time ago that this is over, the rally is over, and that people should be done with this.
And as you can see, as we show you shots from around the area, the great number of people that were here, and if you go 15,000 plus that made the march from the Reggie Lewis Center, and tack on the probably 10 to 15,000 plus on the common area between the two meeting sites today, you had a great number of people that converged in that one spot. Maybe as many as 40 or 50,000 people. We'll wait for the official number, but they seem to be now going in their own directions on a Saturday afternoon.
And as we looked at that picture right there,
there's the State House. We're back at the State House here.
Okay, that's the back of the State House. That's interesting. So people were in front of the State House all day long, and they were talking, and that was the Stand for Solidarity group, where they had speakers and people were there, and Sarah Conji was there, and then they flooded down right there onto the
Yes, seems like a wing is spread to the back of the State House. Now we're going to the other side here, and that is law enforcement. Can I assume that? That would say it's state, yeah, some form, right?
Right.
So that's. So they're making their way toward this group of people that's collected in the back of the State House.
So the back of the State House, of course, is the Beacon Hill area, and that is Cambridge Street is right down the street there, and police there certainly a big presence there.
A number of them.
And there is a gate. It's a gate, and you
There is
can't.
a gate.
And then there's no way you can even get in there anyway. But obviously, people are there for a reason, because they want to be heard. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out exactly why they're there. There's a person there with a megaphone, and
they seem to be leaving. I mean, that it seems that whatever that yellow, that fluorescent green line has created, is they're turning back the other way.
Right. So again, we have our chopper, and as we go to all these different corners of the city of Boston, these are the scenes that we continue to see for the past couple of hours here on News Center 5. And it was a day that we expected, and we expected a lot of people in the city of Boston, and those numbers absolutely panned out.
I'm taking a look at the front of the State House. There's virtually no one there in the front of the State House. So they have shifted. David Bieniek is still on the ground for us. David, what are you seeing?
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, we're seeing police officers in riot gear now moving in. We're at the corner of Tremont and Boylston. There doesn't appear to be any trouble right here. These officers are now moving around the Common on the east side of the Common. Let me see if I can get a little eyewitness account of what's going on here. Excuse me, sir, from Channel 5. What was going on here that led to this?
They're just trying to clear the streets to let the paddy wagons out, and then a lot of people in the way. We heard they had the people in the paddy wagons were the original free speech rally.
But they were trying to get out of here?
So we heard. We don't know. Yeah, we don't know.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So again, the police and the protesters seem to have shut down the intersection here at Tremont and Boylston. This is the direction where we saw the free speech rally participants head toward as the rally wrapped up a short time ago. So they may appear to be having some problems getting the participants out of this location. Meanwhile, on the Common itself, where we just came from, near the bandstand and near the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, there's a celebration going on. The anti-protesters celebrating what they feel was a victory today and being able to shut this rally down early ahead of its 2 p.m. scheduled end times. So now some motorcade officers heading out of the area and a large police presence again here at Tremont and Boylston. Ed and Maria, back to you.
All right, David Bieniek, right there. We should say police wagons, and you see police presence right there. And again, perhaps it's just a show of force, Professor Leonard, that this is what they anticipated on doing. That if that's the case and the numbers hit a certain point, that we're going to do this.
I think it's probably related to their trying to make some operational move. Maybe it is, as the witness on the street was saying, maybe it's the movement of the wagons that are containing people from the free speech movement. In general, when the police deploy in this kind of force, what they're trying to do is to pass a silent message to the crowd. This is going to happen. Please don't stand in the way of it. If it were only a few police officers, that would be much more difficult. So that's why you may see as many as you see on the street right now.
And I should say that area right there, that is the Emerson College area. My daughters are going to be a junior at Emerson College. And I'm going to tell you that because I was there just a few years ago on this day. So some of the freshmen were supposed to move into that area today. Can you imagine? Welcome to Boston. And that obviously was postponed, and they've made other arrangements to do that.
Welcome to Boston.
Yes, this is exactly.
This is the Boston we know, right? It is a place where people have different views and they say things, and we have big marches.
But when you're trying to move your kids' stuff in, my point is that it's a little crowded to carry those milk crates up. Okay, let's go to Nicole Estefan right now. And Nicole, tell us where you are and what's going on there now.
So we are on Boylston as well. Still seem to be escorting some folks that are on Boston Common out of here. They went back in. We bringing more people out. The good news, less of a crowd standing here. And I can tell you the energy in just the last 10 minutes we're standing certainly changed to a more of a calmness right now. Not as many people here. You did see what broke out a little bit of tension when they originally brought those police vans out here. People actually climbing. I know those of you familiar with Boylston, they have the construction that's
So obviously her shot keeps breaking up there, where we apologize for that. And as you see on the left-hand side of your screen, that is a very clear shot of a pretty big police presence there, and people, I believe that is Boylston Street as well, and people just trying to be part of all of this, capture all of this, just stand by, seeing exactly what is going on. And this is the end of what has been, you know, it appears to have been a relatively peaceful day, where you had 10,000 plus, 15,000 plus people marching, and that it appears to have gone peacefully, and it ended at the Common. And the question is, were there speakers? We haven't been able to see any at this point. Now it looks like this is just a police presence and people still milling about, and the question is, what happens next?
Well, now you're at the point where, how do you get 25, 30,000 people just to go about your day, do your thing? You know, this event is over. That's the, how do you finish it? You know what I mean?
Right.
And you've got to now. I think this gives you a good idea of what the security is in place too, because here we are at the back of the State House,
right? Which is interesting.
Would you even think that would be part of the equation?
No, I wouldn't.
You'd have to protect that. But that image on the left. That's Emerson College. That's the corner of Boylston and Tremont, and there's you see more police than you see people who are demonstrating or speaking their mind on the Common. Hold on, Professor. Go ahead.
The backside of the State House is not a place you would necessarily expect to see a demonstration, but it's not surprising to see a significant police presence there. First of all, it's an area that you would want to protect, but it's also a natural staging area for something like state police, who are in reserve in case more police are needed. Mm-hmm. So I'm not surprised to see that there are a number of police available in that.
Well, they're there in the back, and then we were taking an image before of the front of the State House, and there was a nice long line of officers there as well. So obviously the State House is secured, and you wonder, and you ask the question, well, why is that? And yes, of course, you expect to see police presence there, but is there a reason, and why are people at the back of the State House? I mean, are they trying to send a message to the governor, to the lawmakers who are inside? Well, it's Saturday, nobody's in there.
The building. Right.
So I'm not quite sure, and I certainly don't want to speak for them. But as we continue to show you these live pictures, both sides of the screen here, we have police on the left, and that is Boylston Street right there in Boston, right around the corner from where all of this activity was.
That was the path, I believe, that they took. So they took those vans through, and that's the one that they cleared out. So they lined it. And they've kept it lined as the vans have gone through.
And that's to be expected, right, Professor Leonard, to continue that presence right there?
I think they're trying to do this in as low-key a way as they can to get the people separated and get a free avenue and access. But Ed, as you observed earlier, I think this is one of the real challenges of events like this, is as they begin to dissolve, instead of having an organized march that you know where it's going to be and you know where to put the protection, as the crowd begins to disperse, particularly if you have a few people in it who were unhappy about the way things went or who came with an agenda, those people are dispersed in a way that's much harder to control, harder to know where you're going to have trouble. And this is a time of tension for the public safety. As it feels like the tension's going out of the center of it, what it's really doing is flowing out toward the edges.
Mm-hmm. David Bienick is right there where that big, massive vehicle is backing through. David.
Yeah, and we're not exactly sure what this payloader is going to do. Some police vans were just escorted out of here, away from the Common, but now this payloader is backing in to where those vans came out of, and maybe just be using for crowd control or just to help clear the street. But again, a large police presence here at Tremont and Boylston, and a large crowd just standing around looking at what's going on. Excuse me, ma'am. I'm from Channel 5. Did you see what's been going on here? Why the police are all here?
I wasn't here when it started. I arrived when they arrested a young man over here, and there were like 6 police officers on him.
Do you know why they arrested him?
I didn't see the
incident beginning, so I'm not sure what happened.
How was the young man dressed? Could you tell which side he was on, for lack of a better?
He was definitely on our side. He was wearing a white shirt and like jeans or something like that. That's all, yeah.
And how did the police do at their job, do you think?
It seemed like a little bit much force to me. There were like 6 police officers on him. He ended up on the ground. Yeah, that's all I saw.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So, again, a large police presence here, and now some MBTA buses, are not in service buses, are trying to get through it as well. Not sure if they were being used to protect the area from potential vehicle attacks or to transport people. Trying to see if anybody is on these buses, and the buses appear to be nearly empty as they're around the corner here at Boylston and Tremont. So again, a large police presence here. A payloader just moved through the intersection and is now parked here. But the crowd just seems to be observing what's going on, all of this. Head and Maria, back to you.
And the buses, David, that just keep roaring through the area. So clearly they wanted to keep Boylston Street free and clear so they could move traffic through, and not just the first one it went through was a double bus. It wasn't even a single bus, and this one is also a double bus. So these are big space creators. So they're creating space and keeping lanes free.
A lot of planning went into this day all week long, and Tanisha, you were part of that. And you heard some of the discussions, and that's what has to happen now with these big events, and that's just, that's exactly what needs to happen.
Absolutely. I think what we're seeing is law enforcement, Boston Police Department, our state police department, really executing on the plan. They were intent on making sure that public safety was a top priority for today, and they planned. They made sure that they were coordinated, and that whatever we were to experience today, they would be ready. And I believe what we're seeing is them, again, executing on that plan and making an effort to make sure that everyone gets home safe tonight.
I will say that there are some reports out there where people were chanting in the crowd from some of those images that we saw just about 5 minutes ago. This is a police state. This is a police state. So that's now starting to become part of the narrative.
They're starting to free up traffic on Tremont Street, too. That's regular traffic that's getting through now.
In terms of what Tanisha has observed, which is that there was an enormous amount of planning and a high degree of cooperation by the various groups involved here in forming the plan. That all works for the plan for getting there and for what's going to happen while people are there. This is the part that is almost impossible to plan for. How will it now move from where it was, a full demonstration with tens of thousands of people, and back to being a normal city? And that transition is actually extremely difficult to plan, and that's part of what we're seeing.
The speaker you see on the right of your screen, standing at the top, he was standing on a platform above all, is Tito Jackson. He's candidate for mayor.
And it is interesting, Tom Whalen. So Boston Mayor Marty Walsh says that these are the things I'm doing today, and it wasn't that. It was, I'm doing.
He started with the march.
He started with the march, and then he said, "I'm going to move on with the things that are happening in the city that have nothing to do with this." Which tells you what, Tom Whalen?
Well, it tells me that he was exercising some strong leadership today, and that he basically determined that this rally, at least for the protesters, the free speech organizers, was going nowhere, for lack of a better word. That they threw in the towel. And that life goes on here. And I think his actions demonstrate that. But again, getting back to what I said earlier, I'm just surprised that Governor Baker wasn't on the scene. Attorney General Healy was there. It's disappointing that he could not himself exercise some leadership in this situation.
So what I will say, though, just to pick up on that, I do want to certainly commend the governor for his cooperation with the city this week. We sometimes can take for granted the fact that we do have good relationships with both city and state government, and we saw that in action.
Let's get to Josh Bogadier. He's on the right. You can see the speakers are speaking, and Josh Bogadier is right there on the ground. Josh?
Tito.
Hey, guys. Yes, Tito Jackson is speaking right now, of course, city councilor running for mayor. He's speaking to this group of people who, these are all folks who had come to the Common and walked, most of them at least, had walked from Roxbury. Although having said that, I did talk to a lot of people who have come to the area. They drove in. people from Worcester, from Lowell. They actually drove straight to the Common area today. They did not do the march from Roxbury because they wanted to come directly here to oppose the action that was going on here. But one more look at this group here. I'd say this is now several hundred people, no longer in the thousands or tens of thousands, or maybe it's about 1,000 people here who are in front listening to some speakers. But the numbers have certainly started to dwindle after the marching stopped. One little side note I want to say is probably about 15 minutes ago, we saw a bunch of people kind of running over to Charles Street, Beacon Street area, and we later learned that that was somebody in a Trump shirt. And the man who was in the Trump shirt who was over there was surrounded by people yelling, "Shame, shame, shame." At which point Boston police gathered control of the situation. About 4 or 5 officers escorted him up Beacon Street in the direction of the State House. No violence, no problem. The incident was quickly diffused by Boston police as that man came up. I do not know if he said anything to incite a crowd or it was merely the shirt that said Trump on it that got them excited, but that is one thing that happened. So right now this rally does continue for a little while over here. This is the area where Charles and Beacon meet, the exact opposite side from where David is, and a much more peaceful area, certainly quieter area than it is where David is right now, where there's more police action, certainly, than there is here. Guys?
Great, Josh. Josh Brigadier on the Common with us. He walked all the way, the 2 miles. That's all the way.
I hope he has water in that backpack.
So do I.
That's all I want to say as a mother. I want to make sure he's hydrated. Everybody hydrate.
Hydrate.
So,
Nicole Burley she's going to join us right now. Nicole, you're at the corner of Tremont and Boylston, right? Yes.
Boylston, that is correct, Ed. So we're looking at Tremont right now, and take a look at this. Honestly, people seem to be calm. I really do have to commend Boston police on this. They kept people back, but people have remained under control. Also, the crowds out here, people, at least in this location, are being very respectful. When police have asked them to move back, they have moved back. I have not seen one act of violence. Okay, now take a look right now. We do see riot police walking across the street. They are crossing Tremont right now. Prior to this, traffic was flowing just fine along Tremont, but obviously right now we have police in riot gear. They are moving. This is on Boylston. We're not sure right now where they're heading, if there's anything happening down there, but I can tell you right now at this corner, things do appear calm, but again, we do have riot police that are on Boylston now. So we will try to figure out what's going on there, Ed and Maria. But as you take a look at the crowd here, things okay. And we do see now state police in riot gear moving. Now they're moving along Tremont. But again, nobody seems to be engaging with law enforcement officers. Things do appear calm, although we are hearing some chanting right now. I'm not sure. I'm going to be quiet just for a moment so you can maybe pick up on that chanting.
Thank you, Nicole. Let's actually bring in David
Bieniek. I can't tell what they were chanting. It's stuff. Yes.
No, that's okay. We'd actually want to bring in David Bieniek. Thank you very much, Nicole, because David, this is right in front of you as well, correct?
That's right. We're kitty corner across the street from Nicole. And so, yes, both Boston police and state police, about 24 in each contingent, moved in. Some are now heading down Boylston. That's the city police department. And meanwhile, the state police, they headed east along Tremont. They don't appear to be running. It doesn't appear that they are immediately responding. It appears that they may just be deploying at this point. And again, this can be the tense moment in a situation like this. In the minutes and hours following a rally like this, the area around can be sometimes subject to vandalism. So I think they're trying to make a strong show of force here at the beginning to show that will not be tolerated. And at the same time, they're trying to get the streets open again. I'm standing on Boylston, which is currently closed. In fact, it's blocked by a large payloader. But they've tried to get traffic on Tremont Street flowing again so that they can get this part of the city back to normal. And now some of the police vans, maybe some of the same ones that we saw leave the common area about 15 to 20 minutes ago, are coming back. And we don't know what purpose they are serving at this point. Again, the crowd around is mainly just watching what's going on. And so far, no sign of any trouble. We did hear from one witness who said she saw one of the counter protesters being arrested by several dozen police. We don't know what the motive for that arrest was at this point. Ed and Maria, back to you.
All right, David Bean, thank you very much. He's right at that corner of Tremont and Boylston, which seems to be they are, as both David and Nicole have pointed out, they are trying to let traffic get through. You'll notice at one point they'll stop the traffic on Boylston and let Tremont get through, then they'll stop the other side. They'll stop Tremont and let Boylston go through. You can see cars are queued up to try to return to normal in that very busy intersection. And there are still a couple people on the common, as you can see on the right of your screen. That's down by
Charles and Beacon.
Yeah, that's Charles and Beacon, right? And that's where the speeches are, right there. That's where all the people have gathered for the speeches that Josh Brigadier just talked to you about. The State House being to screen right up at the top of the hill. And those trucks that you see on the left have been strategically placed all around the common today to prevent any tragedies like we have seen in Barcelona and that we have seen in Charlottesville, that no vehicles would be able to run through and damage people. I think it's a strong indication of just exactly how prepared the city was. But how do you ever get prepared for something that as live and as active and as multifaceted as this was?
So as we look at these live pictures right now, this is certainly not the number of people that we have seen all day, but people gathering around the common and speaking, which is exactly what we expected, what was going to happen after that march from Roxbury. And now we have people up there on a stage, if you will, and people are standing by and listening. No police presence here, but certainly police all around the city of Boston right now and in all of these different areas. And that's simply just to make sure that things stay safe. When you have this amount of people in the city of Boston, this is what you do. And like you were saying, Professor Leonard, Harvard Business School, Kennedy School of Government, just to remind everybody. We also have Tanisha Sullivan, NAACP Massachusetts president, and we have Professor Tom Whalen, Boston University. And you are well-versed in politics and civil rights, etc. And we see these images now, and we've been at this for a couple of hours now. Some of your impressions. Let's start with you, Tom.
Well, I just think all in all, it's went remarkably well. And getting back to something Professor Leonard said last time, when you think of Charlottesville, what happened there, you had individuals fully armed with, assault rifles and body armor walking around the streets that made it very tense and made it prone, I think, to the kind of violence that broke out here. Because of our existing laws on the books, particularly gun laws, we prevented that kind of scenario breaking out here in Boston.
Tanisha?
Well, I spent 4 years of my life in Charlottesville as an alum of the University of Virginia and was very pained last week at what I saw. Today, as a Bostonian, I'm very proud of what I saw. Certainly, all of us standing up for the right for people to speak, but also making sure that we're standing up for the best in us, and that is a message of anti-racism and standing up against hate.
And Professor Leonard, when we see all of the images that we saw today and the ones that we continue to see, when we see the police walking through right now, some of your impressions.
So I would just agree with what Tanisha just observed. I think it was a beautiful thing to see tens of thousands of people marching peacefully in Boston against hate groups and against things that they don't believe in, and speaking out about that and doing it peacefully. Now, always when you have large events and large numbers of people, they can become a platform for a small number of people who have a different agenda. And we tend to focus a lot on that because that's, and as we have today in our discussion, because that's sort of where the action is. That's where the friction and the sparks are. But what I think we need to remember is that the overwhelming majority of people who came out today, tens of thousands of people, came out in peace to protest against hate. And that is the America that I know and the Boston that I know and that I'm proud to be a part of.
And live pictures right now, right there on the Boston Common, where it's certainly been an eventful day, to say the least. We've had 15,000 plus protesters. I know we keep saying the same thing, but that's how many. And we'll know the numbers as tomorrow. Don't you think tomorrow we'll know it?
Oh, I think
maybe even later today.
Strong indicator, as we said. We used Commissioner Evans as an indicator, and his eyes felt there were about 15,000 at Reggie Lewis alone, and those people obviously made their way toward the Common, which had two groups on it, which had a group at the foot of the State House, and then it had a group down by the bandstand. And both of those had great numbers of people, perhaps as well as many as 15 to collectively. So we were in the 30 grand neighborhood.
You know what strikes me is I believe it was David Bieniek, but someone walked by him and said, what's going on today? And because there are tourists in Boston, it's a very touristy city, and there are people who didn't know, and maybe they're there vacationing, and it is interesting. This is exactly what's happened. So the question becomes, and I think Tom Whalen was saying it, that the Red Sox and Yankees are here. What does tonight look like? And that's, and I don't know. I'm not here to answer that question. I guess I'm here to ask that question. What happens tonight? But certainly today, we have been bringing you these images.
And the Red Sox game is, 5 hours from now? Because it's a 7 o'clock game. So
it is 7,
they have plenty of time to go home, shower, get ready to go back out again and enjoy the city tonight. Folks, it was wonderful that we had you guys wrap up your thoughts. So that's terrific timing. We are going to step aside here at News Center 5 right now. Now, let me tell you a couple of things. One, we're staying in place in case something happens. So rest assured that if something happens,
we'll go right back on. Yes.
And 2, we have a regularly scheduled newscast coming your way this evening, 5:30-ish. I say 5:30-ish because there's a Little League baseball game, which could affect that. But then there is a 6-ish if the Little League game isn't over. And then, so we have scheduled newscasts coming in your direction. So let me take the opportunity to thank Tanisha, Tom Whalen, Rick Avery so much for all you
Rick Avery and Professor Leonard as well.
And Professor Leonard as well. Folks, thank you for joining us at News Center 5. For Maria, I'm Ed. See you later.
Welcome to Fun Home, the groundbreaking new musical about seeing your parents through grown-up eyes. Winner of 5 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. It's an emotional powerhouse and the best of what Broadway can do. Fun Home, October 17th through 29th at the Boston Opera House. Tickets at BroadwayInBoston.com, presented by Lexus Broadway in Boston.
At Intercontinental Boston, Sunday brunch on the waterfront was never quite like this. Views included. Our new a la carte brunch features traditional classics, our famous waterfront Benedict bar, and of course, cocktails. Click here or call 617-747-5151 to make a reservation for Sunday brunch at Intercontinental Boston. Enjoy a taste of Provence. Mark your Sundays and join us in Meow.
Let the adventure begin! With animals from all over the planet, Southwick Zoo will amaze and entertain you with exciting presentations and stunning naturalistic habitats. Enjoy the Skyfari Sky Ride, board the Woodlands Express, or get up close and personal in the petting zoo. Southwick's is more than a zoo, it's an adventure. New England's largest zoo. We are located close by off Route 16 in Mendon, Massachusetts. Learn more at southwickzoo.com.